Okay, so today what we want to do is talk about diabetes and pre-diabetes. And what I've done here is I've made a four-part series just because this topic is so in-depth and there's so many people that are really suffering from diabetes and pre-diabetes. I really wanted to give it a really thorough webcast. So there's a four-part series here. And what I'd suggest that you do is that you make sure that you go through each part and maybe repeat each part one or two different times just to make sure that you have the information, because all the information really builds on one another here. And I just wanted to do a really thorough job, so by the time that you're actually done with the four-part series, you actually feel that you have some understanding and more importantly, some control over how we're going to get you out of the condition that you're in. So I like this slide. It says no matter how slow you go, you are still lapping everyone on the couch. So I just want to congratulate you for listening to this workshop here and taking the steps forward to improve your health and get to really the root cause of the problem. So let's go over some statistics here. These statistics are pretty staggering in my opinion. In 2012, 29.1 million Americans were diagnosed with diabetes. So that's almost 10% of the population. So 10% of our population right now, it's actually more than that because this is a few years old, is diabetic, right? Now check out this other statistic here. In 2012, 86 million Americans were considered to be pre-diabetic. So what does that mean? That means that a condition in which your blood glucose levels are higher than normal, but not high enough to be diagnosed with diabetes. So there's 86 million Americans, and this number is quite staggering too. Look at this, in 2010, there were 79 million Americans, and in a matter of, 2 years, we went up by 7 million more Americans are considered pre-diabetic. So this is an epidemic, and this is lifestyle-induced. It's not genetics. It's not a bad gene. This is all lifestyle-induced. So knowing that, you can get out of the condition that you're in because the lifestyle puts you in it. We just need to give you a little love, a little education, a little understanding on how to get out of this condition that you're in. So you might want to write some of these numbers down, because as I go through the four-part series, I'm going to be referring to these numbers. So these numbers right here are what I would say, these are functional numbers. Okay, my writing's kind of sloppy there. These are functional numbers. So what does this mean? This means these numbers right in here, this is where normal, healthy human beings want to be in. All right, so these are healthy numbers, is what we call a functional range when it comes to these numbers. So we want to see fasting insulin less than 9. We want to see fasting glucose, which would be a morning glucose between 80 and 85. An A1C, which is a 90-day blood marker. If you want more information on some of these markers here, I have a specific, I think it's a 20-minute video on inflammatory markers where I go over fasting insulin and glucose and A1C more in depth. This GFR, what that is, that's a kidney marker. So you want that greater than 80. I have a video specifically just on kidneys. And then creatinine, which is also a kidney marker, you want this to be less than 90. So I would tell you right now, just write down a piece of paper, write these numbers down. If you have any blood work, if I gave you blood work, you want to pull that blood work out right now so you can refer to it, because that's going to give you a lot better understanding as we go through the process here. So all these right here, all these markers right here are of the same person. All right. So look at this here. This is the fasting insulin. So on your blood work, it's just going to say insulin. It's just, if you go fasting, right, which all my patients go to fasting insulin. Now check out this. This is 23. Now if you remember, we want this less than 5, and she's sitting at 23. So insulin comes from your pancreas, and I'll be explaining this as we go along. So this is massively high. Her glucose level is 108. If you remember, we want that between 80 and 85, right? Her creatinine, which is a kidney marker, is 105. That's lab high. So when you see these blues on your if you see these blues and it says a little H right there, that tells you that it's lab high, okay? Not functional range, lab high. I'll be going over a little bit more in depth in a little bit. This down here is her kidney function. It's at 56, and we want this greater than 80. So this is Karen. She's been a patient forever. She's done functional medicine, and it totally changed her life. She lost weight. Chronic fatigue's gone, muscle gone, chronic fatigue is gone, fibromyalgia is gone, stiffness is gone, brain fog is gone, thicker hair, thicker nails, digestion system's way better, more energy. I mean, she's just loving life because we actually got to the metabolic underlying cause of what's causing her problems. Again, this is A1C. This is a 90-day marker right here. Hers is 5.9. So you can see right here that she would be consistent. She'd be consistent with an increased risk for diabetes. So this woman, her name is Karen, is considered pre-diabetic. So these are some of her labs. So you're only as healthy. You're only as healthy as your individual cells. You're literally 100 trillion cells. So you're only as healthy as your individual cells. You have 100 trillion cells. I think that's almost the United States national debt. But you have 100 trillion cells. So you're only as healthy as your individual cells. So what functional medicine is literally starting to get your cells healthy again. If your cells are healthy, you're going to be healthy. Now, this comes from Time magazine. The secret killer is inflammation, right? Inflammation. So if you're chronically inflamed, your cells are not healthy. If you have any of these markers here, if you have any of these markers that are above this right here, above these ranges, right, above functional range, you are inflamed to some degree or another. So I just want to restate that. So if you look at your blood work and you don't have these numbers here, right? If your fasting insulin is, let's say, 9, if your fasting glucose in the morning is, let's say, 95, if your A1C is 6, this right here tells you right now that your body is chronically inflamed, and you're only as healthy as your individual cells, right? You're only as healthy as your individual cells. So this is a cell, right? You're made of 100 trillion cells. Now, if you kind of go back to, biology 101, even in high school, right? You have the cell layer right here, okay? That's the cell membrane. Now, what happens is anytime you have chronic inflammation, what happens to your cells is a very technical term here. Your cells become crusty. So what do I mean by that? The outside right here, see this outside right there? The outside here becomes crusty. So when the outside of the cell becomes crusty, this increases your body's inflammation. It also increases your body's autoimmune attack. So what I mean by that, if your cells become crusty, right, like this, okay, your cells look a little funny. They look a little different. So anytime your cells look a little different, your immune system is always going to be more aggressive. Your immune system is always going to be more aggressive than less aggressive. So if you have chronic inflammation, those functional labs are elevated, like I showed you in a couple slides ago, that tells you that your cells are crusty to one degree or another. You have chronic inflammation and you have some kind of autoimmune disease to some degree or another. Because when your cells become a little crusty here, it looks a little funny, and your immune system starts to attack your tissues. Now, what happens here when your cells become a little crusty, let's say you have insulin here. You have insulin floating around. Well, insulin actually has to get into the cell. Okay, let me just clear this up. Okay, we're going to have insulin here. So this is the little eyes floating around here. Eyes floating around here. Now, that's just going to represent a cell that's kind of crusty. Now, when your cells become crusty, the insulin actually has to penetrate and get into that thing right there, which is called your nucleus. So these hormones need to penetrate the cell membrane and get into the cell and start doing their work. Now, when things are crusty, guess what happens? The insulin comes here, and it's going to what? It's going to bounce off. So you become insulin resistant. You become hormone resistance. Okay, so, or you could say specifically here, you would become insulin resistant, meaning that the insulin can't actually get into the cell. Now, with that being said, when you have crusty cells, let's say we're going to take estrogen. Okay, we're going to take estrogen here. I'm just going to say E for estrogen. If your cells are crusty, guess what happens with the estrogen? It hits the cell and what? Bounces off. If you have progesterone, which women need progesterone, it hits the cell and does what? Bounces off. So you become hormone resistant. So if we're talking about insulin resistance, you'd say you would become insulin resistant. You become estrogen resistant. You'd become progesterone resistant. If you're a man, you become testosterone resistant, because all these hormones have to get into the cell. They just don't dock on the cell. They just don't dock right here. They actually have to penetrate and get deep into the cell and turn things on. So if you have any of those markers that are elevated in the beginning, that tells you that your body is in a state of chronic, global, just means all over inflammation. All right, so one of the things that happens when I read labs, the conventional system is either you have a disease or you don't, right? So blood glucose level here is between 65 and 99. That's a very broad range. So if someone comes in with a glucose of 105, they would be considered to be pre-diabetic. Right? So how people get paid in the current conventional system is you either have diabetes or you don't. You either have high cholesterol or you don't. You either have a thyroid condition or you do not. And this is what happens. So people here can be in this stage right here, which would be pre-diabetic for years and years and years and years. And then you go to the doctor, your blood glucose is at 105. They tell you, well, watch your diet. Well, what does that mean? What does watching your diet actually mean, right? So what we want to do here is we want to actually put in what I would call the functional, the non-optimal range. So this is the dysfunctional range, okay? So that would be the dysfunctional range. So when it comes to glucose, we want our fasting glucose to be between 80 and 85. So let me repeat that. We want fasting glucose in the morning between 80 and 85. Anything above that, so if you have a glucose of, let's say, 96, that's abnormal. That's not a healthy, normal, functional range. So when I'm looking at ranges, I'm really looking at what's a healthy, normal range, which is a lot more narrow right here versus this broad range. So really, if you would go home today, you're going to drive or wherever you're going to go, if we would take out the yellow sign right now and it would just go to red to green, we'd have a lot more wrecks, right? That sounds like our healthcare system. So what functional medicine does is it puts back in the yellow light here. So if I see someone that's sitting at, let's say, 96 degrees or 96 fasting glucose in the morning, I'm thinking, my goodness, that's a problem. We need to start fixing that to get them to optimal, which is between 80 and 85. So here's a huge study. You could Google this if you'd like. This is the Kaiser study. This is a really big study. It's 46,000 people. So this is a massive, massive, massive study. Now, before I go into this study here, just remember, we want your fasting glucose in the morning to be no higher than 85. So what this study showed, every point above 84 fasting glucose represented a 6% increase for becoming diabetic. Okay, so I just want to say that again. And so down here, so if your fasting glucose is 94, right? You're going to go to the doctor. They're going to check your fasting glucose. It's 94. They're going to tell you are what? Normal. Why? Because you haven't hit this disease state. But the research shows that if you have a fasting glucose of 94, you have a 60% increase in developing diabetes in the future. So this is an actual study of 46,000 people. So this is why the functional medicine is so critical, because we're looking at these numbers from where's a healthy human being at? How can we get you there? All right, I'm just going to go over some statistics on blood glucose just so you know how important it is. It says knowing that such shrinkage, so they're talking about brain shrinkage here. So knowing that such shrinkage can happen as a result of blood sugar spikes in the what? Normal range has tremendous implications on anyone who eats blood sugar carbohydrates. So what is this saying? Is this is saying is that if your blood sugar is less than, if your blood sugar is between 65 and 99, so let's say you're at 90, let's say you're at 98 here, okay? What this study has shown is that your brain is literally shrinking, right? But yet you are still in the normal ranges. Now down here, it says people with diabetes are 1.7 times more likely to develop dementia. Okay, so why is that? Because this blood sugar, high blood glucose, when you have diabetes, you have a lot of sugar in your blood that literally actually shrinks the brain, right? It actually shrinks your brain. So we have to get blood sugar under control. Here's another study. Become diabetic doubles your risk for Alzheimer's disease. Here's a really big one, right? No one wants these diseases. These are horrible diseases. They're diseases of nervous system and tissue, and it's just a horrible disease. So one thing that I want to point out here is Alzheimer's disease and depression is unlike the rest of the body. Why? Because the brain has no pain receptors. So you can't feel your brain being inflamed. Your brain can be inflamed, but you don't feel pain because there's no pain receptors. Now this comes back to the Diabetic Association. In 1994, the American Diabetes Association recommended people consume 60 to 70% of your calories from carbohydrates. So what do we have? 1994. Now let's look at the present time here. We have massive amounts of people that are pre-diabetic, diabetic, cancers, heart disease. Okay, so our next slide here, this is some of my patients that have done the functional medicine. And these are, this is the fasting insulin. So if you recall, we want fasting insulin to be less than 9. And this is the gals that I showed you in the beginning. So the beginning blood work here. So you can see her insulin right here is 23. So that's what I'm referring to here. This is actually her blood work right in here. Okay, so this is her blood work. So initially started out at 9, and then you can see how many times that we've measured that. Sorry about the dogs. We just got a puppy here. So then you can see how much we measured that, and you can see down here she started at 23, and then at the end she's 3.7. So she had huge success with decreasing her fasting insulin. She's lost weight. I mean, you cannot lose weight when you have a fasting insulin of that high, and I'll explain that in a bit here. Here's another one of my patients here that did the functional medicine. She started off at 7.2. And then down here, she ended up at 2.7. So when you look at these high numbers here, either or, you know that the person's body is chronically inflamed. You know that their cells are crusty. You know that they're hormone resistant, meaning to every hormone in their body's not working correctly. They have brain fog. They're more increased for cancer, Alzheimer's disease. Basically, every disease you're more prone to if you have this high fasting level. So in a bit here, I'm going to be coming back to this picture, and this right here, this breakfast right here, this low-fat Cheerios, orange juice, banana, and skim milk versus this breakfast right here. And as we walk through this, you're going to see that this is the breakfast that you want to be eating. This breakfast right over here is the breakfast that causes health, weight loss, vitality, decreases heart disease, cancer, strokes, all these things. This here, the breakfast of Cheerios, is the breakfast of chronic disease, and you'll see that very clearly as we walk through here. Just a little background about me. This is when I went up to the Boundary Waters. This is when I was in high school, and when I went up to the Boundary Waters, my weight was 235 pounds. I was grossly overweight, and just up there, something happened like spiritually to me, and within a matter of basically 6 months, I had lost 80 pounds, and ever since then, I've been on a quest really to help as many people as possible. So I've been through the journey. I've been through the health problems, and I'm always working on my health. I consider health not to be a destination, but to be a journey. So you made it through the first part. I look forward to you going through part 2.